Two-Bit Circus is a small company. We're in Los Angeles. And what Ringling Brothers did with live animals and Cirque du Soleil has done with human performers, we're doing with technology. Let me set the stage. You're going to walk into Space Squad in Space. And Space Squad in Space is an experience for from 2 to 8 people. And you walk in there, it doesn't matter if you've never piloted a spacecraft before. You're going to learn. You're going to get good, and you're going to get good fast because the universe depends on you. This experience is incredibly immersive. And what does that mean? Well, let me tell you. 10 minutes in is my favorite part. 10 minutes in, this is after you've accidentally ejected the alien spacecraft into the unseeming void of space, but before you've gotten lost in the asteroid field. And at that very moment, life support in your ship fails. And I have witnessed, no joke, people hold their breath. Space Squad in Space is part of our Story Room brand. And our Story Room brand is all about creating immersive entertainment experiences like this that can be installed anywhere, at scale. We cut our teeth doing this for brands. And so this is a mobile story room. This mobile story room we developed for the CW network to promote the premiere of The Flash. And in here, we gave visitors the ability to gain the Flash's superpowers. This is something we did with Verizon at the Super Bowl. And we put 30,000 people through some very sweaty Oculus Rift headsets. This is 2 giant helmets, each of which contains an Oculus Rift headset. And when you put these things on and you immerse yourself in that world, it's not just about seeing what it's like to be a football player running a pass on the field, but you get to feel what it's like to be a football player running a pass on the field, because those things that you're standing on, those are haptic feedback mechanisms. And so as you run down the field in virtual reality, you feel impulses on your feet. You can feel it. And there's a vest that has a sonic actuator in it. So when the football hits you, you feel it. And it's amazing what happens in virtual reality to see people transported to another place. But when they're feeling the action too, it takes them over the top.
So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about a personal hero of mine, Joseph Campbell. Campbell was a mythologist. So much like an anthropologist, he went around and looked at ancient cultures, other civilizations, societies. We're talking about Native American, South American, African, ancient Egypt, and studied their stories and their legends and their myths. He then went on to study these myths and figured out that they had about 20 to 26 different beats. And he called that the hero's journey. So the first one is, going counterclockwise, is departure. So we introduce a character who is in an uncomfortable or a mundane environment. And he or she, typically it's a he, unfortunately for mythic cultures, gets a call to a venture that he refuses. He doesn't think he's ready. He's usually given a talisman, which is a fancy word for saying a sword or a magic apparatus to get him to cross a threshold. This is a very popular motif. It's the flux capacitor or the DeLorean for Back to the Future. It's the wardrobe in the Chronicles of Narnia. It's the computer monitor for Tron, which then leads us to Act 2, which is initiation, where there's trials, travels, and temptations, which then leads to wisdom, power, and treasure, which then allows our character to come back a changed person. And he comes back to where he started, and it's usually a resurrection scene right here, where he destroys, saves, and or redeems. And so what I've done quickly here is show how Star Wars, in many ways, almost in every way, follows the hero's journey. The filmmakers of Matrix also have been pretty transparent that they're heavily influenced by Campbell. In fact, if you watch The Matrix, he literally gets a call to a venture. And then we go to Harry Potter, essentially the same thing. Harry Potter, its threshold is walking through the 9 3/4 wall. We're all very familiar with this kind of iconic imagery of a shaman, of a tribal leader, leading his flock in this engrossing story. The best stories survived. The bad ones, were forgotten. They were transmitted through a web. So I told someone, he told 5 people, they told 10 people. You guys get it, it's viral. Sachs then describes how we went to the broadcast tradition. And he says that this started at the Gutenberg Press, the first book that was published. That now we have gatekeepers who decide which stories survive. He's coined this new era called the editorial era. And in many ways, we have returned back to the oral tradition in the sense that now it's survival of the fittest. Anyone that has a web connection or a web presence can now share their stories, and the best ones rise to the top. Anyone, for the most part, can borrow, steal, and remix content that they found online and get away with it. The thing that comes to mind the most is when the trailer for the last Star Wars came out, and everyone was talking about what the heck is up with Kylo Ren's lightsaber. And so my Facebook feed was just overflowing with reinterpretations, because everyone's seeking meaning, explanation, and ritual in it, right? On the other spectrum is someone like Chrysler, who came with this great campaign imported from Detroit. It was so good that people started making T-shirts. And what did Chrysler do? They sued them. So instead of celebrating, instead of fostering it, they sued them. At that time, they were basically in the broadcast era. If this stuff is going to be here to stay and not a novelty, it's got to talk about these archetypes, this stuff that's hardwired in us, this myth building, which is so important to telling stories. It's also got to recognize that we're in this digital era. Like Facebook, I think, gets it, right? They've put a ton of money into Oculus. They've spent a few bucks for it. They've also put out this 3D camera, 360 camera, which is open sourced. That's pretty ballsy. And we also realize that storytelling is communal. The fact that my wife gets mad at me when I watch Breaking Bad episodes without her is a testament that storytelling, even though we're sitting right next to each other watching the same flat screen and not saying anything, there is a sort of special bond that we have when we're listening to stories.
So my name's Shiraz Akmal. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Spaces. And we are focused on virtual and mixed reality. And we were part of a team called the Dream Lab. And it was probably one of the most fun jobs I've ever had in my life, and certainly for all of our kids. We were building things like reimagining visiting Santa Claus in the mall, to hanging out with our characters, like the penguins of Madagascar, on virtual sets, and everything in between, from theme park rides to touring attractions, to consumer and corporate sponsorship partnerships with corporations like Denny's and McDonald's and you name it. And so it was really a wonderful time for us. Today, I was really excited about speaking from the perspective of brands. Having worked for a very large brand and with a lot of partnerships, one of the important things that we realized early on when we found ourselves talking about VR was the idea that it's three-dimensional. And this is a really important thing, especially for those of you who haven't had a chance to try it or build a project. But if you think about VR, we kind of think of it as a space. Our definition is it's a unit of virtual or mixed reality. In Close Encounters, a Steven Spielberg film, the 3 main characters, Roy, Jillian, and Larry, were climbing this devil's tower, this mountain, and they all had visions of this tower. Roy famously said, well, maybe you should try sculpting. So one of the important things with this, and what we think about, what we had thought about a lot at DreamWorks, and what we think about at Spaces, is the idea that you need to look around the mountain. Take, for example, Disneyland. It's designed in a way where, as you know, there's Main Street lined with buildings, and those buildings take you right to the castle. Now, you can go anywhere, but most people generally head to the castle. So the space at Disneyland is designed in a way to encourage certain types of behavior and interactions with the characters and the surroundings. So we always say design spaces rather than pages. So location-based VR is actually pretty critical, I think, for any frontline marketing efforts you may have. And the reason is, I know we're in Seattle and Los Angeles and New York and San Francisco are the same, VR is hot, but 99.99% of the people on this planet have never used VR. They may not even have heard of it, maybe they've started to hear about it, let alone try it, whether it's cardboard or the Vive. And I think that's really important from a marketing and business perspective to remind yourself that that's the case. Even through 2016, for content creators and brands, one of the best partners you have today, and at least through the next few years, really are the hardware manufacturers who have every interest in promoting your content in order to help sell the hardware itself. Today, we look at all of our partners in the VR and mixed reality space as partners rather than competitors, because there's so much more that has to be done to create kind of an audience and a market for this sort of stuff. So I really, recommend reaching out and embracing your peers in that, in getting your content out there. We think that from a marketing perspective, there's so many things that can be done with or without the hardware, using existing social media channels, and then certainly building towards the future that's coming, I think, relatively fast in the next few years. And I think what's really exciting is pushing yourselves from a creative kind of perspective to see what's possible, and we're really excited to be at the forefront, along with many of you, in figuring that out.
So traditionally, you watch a video, you hit play, you sit back and you consume it from beginning to end. With interactive video, you're expected to lean forward and interact, and kind of you sort of do something to the video, and the video responds in some way. It's like a two-way conversation. So this is a video, obviously. It's got people and it's got objects, and they move around. And you'll also see that they have these sort of dotted bounding boxes that appear over the tops of those people and objects as they move. That's us. That's our technology. And now these have been added by machines, not by us, not by humans. These have been added by our machines, things like face detection, face recognition, object redetection, that sort of stuff. But these are essentially touch points that your audience can then interact with. You can add lots more of these, but yeah, that's the basis of our technology. And there are three main use cases for what Wirewax gets used for. The first being enriching content, so just providing audiences with more information. So, for example, if I want to find out who this guy is, I can just reach forward and click on him, and oh yeah, it's Daniel Craig, great. I want to find out who painted this, for example. I think that's Thomas Eakins, yes. Just want to find out how to bake this cheesecake. Boom, there you go. You get the idea. We're sort of famous, I suppose, for some of the work that we've done with the BBC, this one in particular for Sherlock. This was a repurposed TV ad, thank you very much. One fan, at least. It's a shoppable video. It's the most common use. And that really means just buying stuff from video. So I'm watching something and I want to buy it. I can just lean forward, I can touch it, grab it, and I can buy it, like these boots, for example, for Vans. This is the most boring slide in the world. But what we're trying to say here is that this drives a huge wedge in the conversion funnel, right? So now you see something in video, you can respond straight away, you can act on impulse, and you can do something about it. So how does this all fit into 360 and VR? Well, we've probably been getting anywhere between 2 and 3 inquiries a day over the last 6 months.
Yeah, and we put this in the description, but it was 2 or 3 probably every quarter or less last year. So it's been a massive change in the amount of interest in this area, obviously.
So what is 360? Well, it is video that's it's an experience that's been around for nearly 20 years, right? And not much has changed. It has got better, it's got more accessible, it's got easier to produce, and it's got more efficient. But there are compromises, right? It's just everything has to be completely flat, right? You can't shoot with a shallow depth of field, so everything looks like it's been shot on an old iPhone. So about a month ago, we started working on this. We pretty much got everybody on it for a couple of weeks, and we cracked it. And so this is what it looks like. So we've just taken some 360 videos that we found on YouTube, and so I kind of try to prove how we can improve them and enrich them and make them better with Wirewax. So this one is a Vice Sports video.
We're a little bit sarcastic, as you might tell. Well, I mean, we are British, but 360 is a thing that needs to be creative. It needs to be thought about as much as you're making a normal video. A lot of the problem with technology when it's applied to creative industries comes about because people get very excited about the technology and lose the creative. So one of the reasons why this Interactive 360 project we're launching with Ayzenberg is so important is that the guys have been thinking about it from concept outwards. It's about using the narrative and actually making a point for making it 360.